Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Richard Morchoe, the Long Hill Report, and as usual, for our July meeting, we have Gus Steeves with us to
Hello
discuss what's going on. And it's difficult.
It's getting more and more confusing, unfortunately.
Big event last week or two was Russia was falling apart. It didn't actually, but there was...
And it never wasn't in danger of doing so.
Well, we don't. I mean, what can we know? But there was an event where the leader, Prigozhin of the Wagner Group, I don't know if it was named after Richard Wagner.
No clue. Who
But
cares?
they one website referred to them as the opera singers or something. But he moved up north towards Moscow and was stopped at Rostov, and then Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, said, hey, why don't you come out to Belarus? The amount of speculation that has been going on about this, was he on the verge of taking over Russia? Did Lukashenko speak sense into him? Did Putin get scared, or did Putin man up? Is the Russian army falling apart, or is it strengthening? You can't tell the players, well, a scorecard, and the scorecard's kind of funny. There's some people, I've been reading about events, and I think they completely blew it.
No, of course it is.
And some people, I think, have come off fairly well. But where Wagner is in Belarus is a lot closer to Kiev than it would be to get there from Russia.
At least that part of Russia, yeah.
Was this a bit of kabuki theater? Now, I want everybody in the audience, and I especially want you and our in-studio audience, not to laugh. But in the 80s, I mean in the 70s, late 70s, I attended an intelligence school. And when my father, who loved to joke with me, when I said I'm going down there to Fort Bragg, he said, well, learn some intelligence. And tell you how my family thought of me. Anyway, at that time, we were still dealing with the Soviet Union. And we were discussing what had been garnered and learned about Soviet doctrine. And one of the instructors said, every Russian division, I don't remember if he said company or platoon, but they have a company or a platoon tasked with making the enemy, if they're in a conflict, think they're going in the opposite direction. What we don't know about, it's knowledge about Russia, is the term maskirovka.
Yeah.
It means masking things and not saying what you're thinking, saying something else, getting your enemy to think differently. Russia, the Russian military, is very sophisticated, and intelligence is very sophisticated about that. Now, like I said, the units, the Wagner units, are a lot closer to Kiev. Kiev. I use the old term.
Kiev.
Was that the plan
Yeah.
in the first place? Who knows?
Well, it's interesting that I think they're also a lot closer to Poland. And Poland there's been some evidence that Poland has been arming up their frontier with Belarus too.
Yes.
So it could be an issue of some sort of a backroom deal between Moscow and Minsk to have a little extra reinforcement on that frontier, just in case something stupid happens. And there's been an awful lot of stupid happening lately.
Well, the point is that would be a very good defensive move.
It would be.
And
Yeah, it would make sense.
Could be, if the time comes, Lukashenko says, I've had it. Why don't you bolt down to Kiev very quickly?
Yeah.
Take the place.
Yeah.
So what's happening There's lots of maskirovka, and we're not going to know. And a lot of the people that you'll see on TV, on radio, on YouTube, like who comes to mind is Colonel McGregor, have been wrong quite often. He predicted a war not lasting too long, lasted a lot longer than he thought was going to happen. To his credit, he said, I was wrong. There's a number of other ones. There's a guy I actually read because he aggregates information, kind of anti-Semitic, but he seems to kind of have a little bit of a better handle than most people.
Which one?
What?
Which one?
I don't know, his name is Zymphora is the blog spot.
What is it called?
Zymphora, Xymphora.
Oh, I've never heard of that one.
A little Trey, kind of not the type of person you'd have over for dinner maybe, but he knows it. He seems to be a little better informed.
Yeah, I used to see that at Vineyard of the Saker. I used to read them pretty frequently, and then they basically got rid of their English blog. They started having problems, I guess, with U.S. censorship. So now they only publish in Latin America and Europe. So unfortunately, since I can read some Spanish, but I'm not good enough to read it in any depth. So I've kind of got it bookmarked. I glance at it, but I can't really follow it anymore, unfortunately.
I think Moon of Alabama is pretty good.
Yeah, he's a German.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not somebody from the Beltway.
But what I think is interesting is you see some of these bloggers and the ones that seem to have a better handle on what's going on both in the Ukraine, in the Middle East, and in Europe, are usually the ones that are not here in the U.S. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we are so, in our culture, we're so separated from the rest of the world that we forget how important it is to understand what's going on in the rest of the world and look at it basically non-judgmentally. Because there's so much effort in our country today from both Democrats and Republicans to slander anybody who contradicts whatever their viewpoint of the day is.
Well,
usually for money, unfortunately.
Most Democrats and Republicans are pro-Ukraine.
Yeah, they are.
You get a few,
right,
like Massey and Rand Paul, who aren't.
Yeah.
I don't know if any other Republicans aren't.
There's a handful of them that are coming out supposedly talking more, that are more. They seem to talk about about doing stuff to end the war in Ukraine, but a lot of them seem to be more interested in shifting toward a war with China, which we know better, and it's just stupid.
It's really.
In fact, having a war with Russia or with China ends up having a war with both. So.
Well, there's also a few Indians who are fairly good.
Yeah.
Xanthan, I think his name is. Canthan or Xanthan or something. There's some very outre nuts in this country. But the Democrats seem to be solidly on the Biden camp.
Oh, they are, very much.
You only, from the left, you only get people like Gray Zone. Gray Zone has been on the ball for years. Aaron Mate, before he was with Gray Zone, I get to know about him when he took down Luke Harding,
right,
who is an absolutely disgusting person. And Luke was thinking, well, this guy's on the left like me. He'll give me a kiss. Nope. Aaron Mate just cracked his skull, deservedly so.
Well, yeah, because the guy was plagiarizing.
Max Blumenthal, you would think, being the son of Hillary Clinton's evil genius, he would be definitely on Team Democrat. He ain't.
Which is good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually one of the quotes that I cited. You're familiar with the Graham Blumenthal resolution?
The Graham Blumenthal.
Blumenthal
my
Grand
gosh.
Revolution?
That
That
when
idiotic
you say
one?
Blumenthal, you're not talking Max. You're talking
No,
to
I'm talking about the
Combat,
senator.
Senator Combat
Senator,
Blumenthal,
yes,
who
yeah.
lied about his military record.
That one. Yeah, him.
And Lindsey Mindless Graham.
Yeah, exactly. It's that. Exactly. Because they put this resolution in. Let me see if I can find it exactly, and which specifically aims at declaring that any use of tactical nukes in Ukraine, and specifically anything that basically causes radioactive release, any associated with any nuclear power plants in Ukraine, particularly Zaporizhia,
Which brings
would be treated as an attack on NATO, which is ridiculous since Ukraine is not in NATO.
Well, it is ridiculous. But what is ridiculous that has stopped us? Anyway.
Unfortunately, that's true. And it's getting more and more ridiculous, which is scary.
The thing is, your man Zelensky
Yep.
has been talking about, the Russians are going to blow up Zaporizhia, whatever the nuclear power plant. What? The Russians?
Why would they want to do that?
Yeah.
They control
what's
it.
the point? They're winning anyway.
They're winning anyway, and they control it.
Yeah.
Why would they want to do that?
Well,
it's their nuclear power plant.
The only reason he's bringing it up is because Blumenthal and Graham. That's it. I mean, they're trying, and too many people push back on that, which is why I don't think the false flag went off.
It probably wouldn't. And I mean, I was reading something saying that theoretically their window was somewhere between, I guess, yesterday and the 9th or the 10th, but before they have that big conference in Lithuania.
Yeah.
Chances are it will be as much of a fizzle, if anything happens at all, as their latest counteroffensive has been, which was promoted for like the last 6 months and turned into a lot of bloodshed and stupidity.
Which brings up another thing is how little you can know about things, because supposedly they are losing. The attrition is not in their favor.
Mm-hmm.
Why haven't they cracked?
Because we keep propping them up.
Well, but I mean, you have to have men running the things,
Right.
And they're losing them.
Mm-hmm.
At what some have speculated, a 10-to-1 ratio.
Yep. I've seen everything from average of 5 to 10 to 1. Yeah.
So, I mean, and now they've gone for the absolute conscription of everybody.
Pretty much.
You would think that, well, first of all, every intelligent person got out.
Mm-hmm.
They saw how this was going. So there's millions of people in Europe. They've told me that, like the farm workers now in Poland, no, they haven't told me, I've read it, are now all Ukrainian men, young men.
Mm-hmm.
I can believe that, because if you go to, in the last several years, if you've gone to Ireland, you hear as many Polish accents as Brogues.
Right. It probably is. A lot of that probably is true. I remember maybe a year ago now, I did a story for the paper on a fundraising effort for Ukrainians in Poland, and at the time they were talking about this particular community whose name I can't remember now, where they had a whole slew of the Ukrainian families and kids in their Polish school system, so it doesn't surprise me that an awful lot of them they're all over Europe now, and they're often and a lot of them are being treated pretty badly, from what I've read.
Beats being the target of an artillery shell.
True, absolutely.
So we get to Zaporizhia, and if in the next few days we don't hear much, well, we can say somebody used a little common sense.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting, it seems like we hear all of this propaganda about something big happening, and then nothing happens.
Well, we didn't hear enough propaganda about Nord Stream, and something big happened.
That is true. Maybe those are the ones we should be worried about, is when we don't hear much and then something happens.
In the immortal words of Donald Rumsfeld, unknown unknowns.
Right. if I could quote something that kind of ties directly into another great quote that I came across. Have you ever read the? I've seen several references to him over the last couple of months. So I've started reading this guy named Aurelian's blog.
I did read one once, and it was very good about France.
Right. Well, he's talking about. Actually, sorry, that's not the right one. Where did the quote go? Because it wasn't actually an Aurelian quote that was relevant to this one, and now it seems to have just disappeared. I think I forgot to save it.
We've invited techie Gus Steeves in to.
And I'm doing real well today. Yeah, it's not the quote I was looking at. Sorry. Oh well.
Well, these things. Technology is not the be end of it.
No, it is not. It should not be.
Okay.
It's a great information source, but you have to be somewhat careful with where you get your information sources from.
That's true. Very, very true.
Mm-hmm.
So, what else has been going on in the world now? Biden is, of course, saying Bidenomics.
That's not really anything new, really. I mean, what exactly is he defining this to be? To me, it seems, given his practice so far, it would be saying one thing and doing something else.
Oh, well, that's probably true.
Especially, he'll say something supposedly beneficial to either the working class or to the environment, and then he'll turn around and step on both of them, which has been his practice for years now.
The working class is certainly on nobody's in government's radar.
Not at the moment, that's for sure.
I will say I'm not a Trump supporter, but he was at least less bad for the worker, not probably intentionally necessarily, but I think he had more. I've heard the saying that if you know 5 people in New York, you know at least one person who's been cheated by Donald Trump. But I think he knows how to deal with people who are not in the think tank crowd or the NGO crowd. He knows how to He knows how to talk to people who are not in that class. And nobody in government, on the upper level of government, knows how to do that.
Probably true. What do you think about this concept, okay? Virtual reality is the only reality that the American political establishment knows. External objective reality simply does not exist for these people. All the more so that we are living in a post-truth world ushered in by Donald Trump. I don't think it was necessarily ushered in by him. I think it was started long before him. We've had post-truth world for a long time now.
Why does everybody key on Trump?
I agree.
I mean, Trump was not a paragon of truth. I won't say that.
No, he wasn't.
Or veracity or anything like that. But I mean,
he was no worse than anyone else.
Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Obama. Either of the Bushes. Clinton.
Reagan.
Does anybody ever think? Would anybody ever say Clinton was a truth teller?
No.
No, but I know people who will say, "Oh my God, I've been in a car. I couldn't get out. I was driving somebody somewhere who's reading me like it was the Bible from Obama's, biography or autobiography or something, like it was Holy Writ."
Right.
You embarrass yourself with that type of thing.
Well, a perfect example, I think, to show kind of what you're talking about and just how mendacious our government has become at pretty much all levels is the recent appointment of Elliott Abrams by the Biden administration. He is like the consummate swamp monster.
Well, you could get Bill Kristol in there.
They probably will. Give him time.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, this guy is definitely a criminal.
He was convicted to be a criminal.
Yeah.
He was pardoned later by George H.W. Bush.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make him not a criminal.
No,
Of course, the problem is that our government has got so many criminals, and they write the law to make their criminal activity legal.
well, that's a lot of that.
That's the problem.
But if they don't get the law changed beforehand, sometimes they got to convict a guy.
Yeah, and then sometimes they get pardoned, like he did.
But now, these guys like Elliot Abrams, Crystal, and everybody like that, they were neocon Republicans.
Yeah.
The term means neoconservative in that we've defined conservatism differently. Now they slot into the Democratic Party like a lubricated key into a lock.
Yeah.
It boggles the mind, but nobody's going to say. And now on the news, this is what's his name, Muir, David Muir.
Oh,
I want to tell you about a real scandal of a scumbag getting into government. You ain't going to hear that.
No, because they're all there. It's just a revolving door.
Yeah.
It's gotten to that point between, they'll spend some time in some corporate, usually a defense contractor of some sort or other. And that's another great example of one of the quotes that I came across, talking about, you mentioned the gray zone earlier, and the Ukraine corruption and tax dollars going to all kinds of organizations, Pentagon contractors for companies. This particularly, he mentions a company called Atlantic Diving Supply to provide Ukraine for unspecified explosives equipment. I wonder what that was used for. $1 million payments to single private entrepreneurs in Kiev, private equity firms, padding the budgets for television stations in Toronto. How does that have to do with Ukraine? A think tank in Poland, rural farmers in Kenya. And these are all money that are supposed to be tracked by way of, supposed to be Ukraine money going to Ukraine. Not that I think we should be funding Ukraine. But, and as he points out here, the winners are people like Secretary of State Tony Blinken, who has spent time between Obama and Biden administrations launching a consulting firm known as West Execs Advisors, which secured lucrative government contracts for intelligence firms and the arms industry. And see, this is exactly what happens with these people. Is they go into government, they stay there for a term or two, they get out for a term or two, they just bounce back and forth. They change jobs slightly in either place. You've got.
Let's take it a Blinken now. Of course, he's been in government, but he's been rising. This hasn't been the revolving door. This is the revolving door upward for these guys. This is the highest
upward
he's
in
ever
this case.
been.
Yeah, feeling upward.
And Sullivan as well.
Yeah.
When did you hear about Blinken before this administration?
Never.
Oh, yeah. Now,
I think Sullivan, if I recall correctly, Sullivan played some sort of a role in the Clinton administration, didn't he?
I don't know.
Or maybe it was Obama.
I think it was the Obama administration.
Might have been Obama. Yeah.
So, get your scorecards. You can't tell your players without a scorecard.
True. I mean, it's interesting is that if you look at the history, if I can throw, I know I've kind of made a comparison this in the past, and I'm going to bring it up, is that, my area of kind of interest is more of the Muslim world history. And our government is very much in the same state that the Ottoman Empire was circa 1900. Well, maybe now going into 1918. Because back then they were a country who their entire economy basically required wars. And when they started seriously losing their wars, their economy fell apart.
They'd been losing wars for quite a while.
And they had been. And they were increasingly indebted to France and Britain, and had been had to the point where their treasury was taken over by the British and literally run by them.
Yeah.
That had happened before this point. And then in the late 1800s, they had a revolt called the Young Turk Revolution. Yeah. And those people basically ended up taking over the government. They kind of morphed into what they called the Party for Union and the Committee for Union and Progress.
Which meant, of course, an Armenian genocide.
Among other things.
Yeah.
But my point is that their system, the more I read about their system, it looks an awful lot like what we're doing. where you have this inner cadre of people who are running things basically for their own benefit, with nationalistic mantras and all this war talk going on, and basically just running the country into the ground.
I think
Which is what's happening to our country with the neocons.
I think the Turks knew they were on the ropes,
Oh yeah, they did.
but they couldn't get out of World War One, and the Germans, of course, were promising them the world. So I think we still have too many people who believe we're solid.
Oh, I agree. That's the problem.
I think for the Young Turks knew, and the Sultan knew things weren't going well.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't know what to do. I remember reading when I was a boy a biography of Ataturk,
Mm-hmm.
and he quite loathed the military establishment when he was a young officer because they didn't do the attention to detail that he thought they needed. So they were in need of an Ataturk, and they got him eventually.
Yeah.
But the crew that was there were going nowhere.
Well, there's kind of catch what we're in now. The crew we have running our show is going nowhere and slowly parasitizing what's left.
That is, yeah. But I mean, some things like that are done, you can't. They will not let you say might be a little childish, like.
You can say it, but they won't hear you.
No, I mean, you will be castigated if you say, I don't think in first grade you should be having drag shows.
Oh.
Probably shouldn't be talking. You shouldn't
Probably
be talking about sex anyway at that age. If you say that in certain circles, you will be called, sexist. And some of that. If you say, maybe there is a limit to how many people can come into the country, you will be said, oh my God, these poor people, what they've happened. What are we, you're a complete racist. And I know you might have a little disagreement.
Well, it's not I don't think it's an issue of racism. I think it's an issue of, I think we have a lot of these issues that are thrown at us as distraction from actually looking at how some of these issues are really being handled or not handled, and who's actually benefiting. I mean, the problem is our society should be encouraged to ask that question, cui bono. But the problem is we don't.
No.
And the benefits are not going to the average people for almost any of our policies at this
Of
point.
course not.
Whether it be immigration or tax policy or whatever.
But every government is like that. Every government, from the beginning of time. I mean, look. Okay, so we had the discussion about Cromwell last week. Now, I'm going to say that that Alfred, this government that Alfred put in England, evolved to a better deal for the English people, and probably would have evolved better for the whole Western Islands. Notice he doesn't say the British Isles.
Okay.
Anyway, but who came in at Hastings? William the Conqueror.
Yeah.
He was nothing but the capo di tutti capi of the Norman Mafia.
He was.
That was a complete mafia.
Basically.
And that's his government. Now, this guy who just was adorned as with a little crown there, he may say he's a little different, but it's basically the same. And it's always been the government of England for the benefit of a ruling class.
That's
At some point it becomes
true.
the bourgeoisie, maybe, but
That's probably true.
it's always a ruling class. And it's always going to be a ruling class. And the average guy got to get really lucky. And sometimes they do in a time and place, but not often, necessarily. I'm looking for a disagreement.
I don't know if I can entirely disagree with that. I mean, I think there have been some times in history where the average person got more benefits than in other times of history.
I'll tell you one time, the Black Plague, when enough died off that they had to pay exorbitantly to get the peasant to plow the field.
There's probably some truth to that. I mean, the problem is it shouldn't have to happen because of mass destruction.
Well, I mean, who plans these things? Other than
we've got an easy government now that are planning mass destruction.
Some people are saying, of course, some people are saying that was behind the COVID thing, but I'm not saying
Right,
that
no, neither am I.
necessarily.
I mean, I think that there are people that kind of seem to be planning or seem to be wanting World War III. I don't know if they seriously want it or they just think that they'll be immune to it or what, but
Well,
or they're just talking out one side of their mouth and have no idea what they're actually talking about.
well,
It's hard to tell. It goes back to the whole idea of having a scorecard and not knowing
we will
what
have
the
this
scorecard is.
to end this discussion with the famous saying, "What were they thinking?" And we might say that in another year or two. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. This has been the Long Hill Report with Gus Steeves, Richard Morchoe. See you in August.